we are finally live. If you are here, you're welcome. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for patiently waiting for this session to begin. I see that there are quite a few people here waiting that have been waiting for a while. Yes, we encountered some technical difficulties. Given that today is a public holiday, so the network is pretty congested. But I'm happy that I'm finally able to stream this session. So once again, it's Thursday Live with Dr. Jen, and I'm excited to dig in to today's topic with you. I hope that by the end of this session today, you're going to be enlightened, you're going to be encouraged, because discipline truly can be a topic that can sometimes make you ask a lot of questions, right? Can sometimes make you question your approach. We're going to discuss all of that, including the difficult feelings that come up when dealing with different types of behaviors from our children, and how to know when your discipline is not working or whether it is indeed working. Great. So I'd love to hear from you. Throughout this month, we have been discussing, throughout the month of April, we have been talking about discipline. This session today is to round up the topic we've been focusing on for the month, which has been effective child discipline. So today I'm going to go deeper into a topic that I believe is not discussed enough when it comes to discipline. The fact that sometimes parents will find themselves in a situation where they begin to wonder if what they are doing is actually working, especially when you choose to apply discipline and not use punitive measures. Sometimes especially when you have a background, right? Most of us are coming from the background where discipline is completely different from what we are trying to do now with our children. So there's always going to be that lingering fear of whether what you're doing is really helping this child, or are you allowing your child to go astray. So those doubts are going to come up. If there is one question that parents often reach out to me to ask or to get reassurance, it has to be on the topic of discipline. Especially when you have maybe your significant others, maybe the child's grandparents, your spouse, that constantly question your methods, or that constantly try to scare you into saying, this thing you're doing, you're damaging this child, you're destroying this child, and all of those kinds of things. So when that is happening, it can truly cause you to have a lot of doubts and to become desperate with your approach. So we're going to look at all of that. All right. And I know that by the end of this session, you're going to be refreshed, you're going to be encouraged, and hopefully your perspective is going to be in the right direction. Once again, you're welcome. As soon as you come on board, let me hear you in the comments. Where are you joining from? And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, why? Right? Every Thursday, we are here with exciting topics to equip you, to empower you. And there is one thing you can do to support the work that I do here every Thursday. It is just by simply subscribing. So please subscribe, and don't forget to invite someone else to join you. You can share the link to this session to have some other parents from your circle come in and learn about discipline too. So if you're here with me, and if you saw the announcements I put up on the different platforms, I'm sure that it might be because you probably are dealing with something difficult and you want to know when to know that what you've been doing is not working. All right. So we are here to troubleshoot discipline approach or discipline strategies to ensure that we are indeed doing the right things that will eventually yield the results that we are hoping to get. So before I go any further, I'd like to first of all establish the fact that discipline is one of those aspects of parenting that usually brings a lot of frustration for so many parents, some more than others. And I think that the more a parent understands how a child develops, the less frustration the parent is experiencing or experiences when they approach the subject of discipline. Because the more you lack knowledge about what kinds of behaviors are age appropriate and what you should be doing and what your objective should be, you're going to spend your time being frustrated because you keep expecting the rock to produce water. All right. I like using that expression because literally that's what you're trying to do. Whenever you have inappropriate expectations, it's like expecting water to gush out of a rock. It's not going to happen, right? So the reason why many parents encounter so many frustrations on their journey is because they keep expecting water to come out of a rock. They have age inappropriate expectations, child inappropriate expectations. Okay, so if you've ever felt like your discipline is not working, let me hear you in the comments, right? What was that behavior you encountered? What was that scenario you encountered? Something that you came across that proved a little difficult, that was not as easy, as some other things that you've tackled, that seemed to linger, seemed to take quite a long time, for the child to finally be able to do the right thing. Let me hear you in the comments. And if you have been, following me or taking any of my courses, then I'm sure you must have the tools to ask yourself the right questions, whether it's age appropriate behavior, are you approaching it correctly? So, knowledge actually helps you troubleshoot your approach. Asking those questions is very crucial, especially when it comes to discipline. And we're going to see why this is so. All right, so have you ever experienced, felt like your discipline is not working? Have you ever had that feeling? And if your answer is yes, I'd like to hear from you. What behavior were you dealing with? What behavior were you trying to tackle that made you feel as though what I'm doing is not working at all? That made you consider, trying every single thing out there. Okay? So make sure you understand before we go any further that discipline is a process. All right. If you agree with me that discipline is teaching, it's helping your child learn how to make better choices, then you'll agree with me also that it cannot happen overnight. Lasting change does not happen overnight. It will not happen overnight. It needs you to be patient and to endure a process. But then, while enduring the process, you need to be sure that what you are doing is taking you in the right direction. Because again, you can be sweating, but then you are sweating in the wrong direction. The wrong road will never take you to the right destination. That's why it's important to understand how to troubleshoot your approach, right? How to ask those questions that will help you know whether, even though you have not yet gotten the results that you're working towards, are you on the right road? That's what this session is going to help you accomplish, all right? To be able to ask those questions that will keep you encouraged, keep you, motivated to keep going, even when it seems as though nothing is working. All right. So we're going to go through a series of different things that have to do with discipline. But first, let's look at why is it that discipline can be very frustrating for parents. Why is it that this is the one area where parents encounter a lot of frustrations? All right. The reason number one would be the fact that we expect discipline to produce immediate results. That's why we're often frustrated. So we are not expecting the right thing. We expect that just because I told the child not to do this yesterday, today or and forever, that behavior should never surface. That's why we hear phrases like, you again, didn't I tell you not to do so and so? How many times do you want me to tell you this and that? Okay, so if you were in yesterday's session on Facebook, where I was teaching about toddlers and some of the hallmarks of toddler discipline, I said that one of the things you must be ready to do is to repeat yourself. And this applies to kids of all ages. Now, the amount of repetition needed will differ depending on the age of the child. So the older the child becomes, the less you might need to repeat yourself. But the younger the child, the more repetition is needed. But just remember this fact that no skill is built overnight. Lasting change is not built overnight. If you can embrace that fact, it will help you to be a bit more patient. It will help you to expect the behavior to repeat itself. So we often are defeated because we don't expect it to ever show up again. Even for those who are using the beating and the yelling, the reason why we get to a point where we are frustrated is because we once you beat the child the first time or you yell at the child the first time, you don't expect it to come again. So when the child does it again, usually the parent is frustrated because they're like, why do I have to deal with this thing again? How many times do I have to teach you this before you get it right? So those phrases are not appropriate because they are in essence telling you that this child should never do this thing again just because you corrected them last time. I love using the analogy of a classroom. Imagine that your teacher came to class, introduced a new topic, taught you that topic just once, and then tested you and expected you to pass. So that's not how teaching, the best teachers don't do it that way. The best teachers know that every new subject needs to be emphasized in different ways before you can expect to test what you have taught. So it's the same thing with parents, it's the same thing with children. Just because you caution the child one time doesn't mean that your lesson has gone through. Usually, you're going to need to emphasize what you have taught in different ways and be patient while your child is developing the skill that they need to help them behave in the way that you expect them to behave. So that's the first reason why parents are mostly frustrated, because they expect to correct just once and eliminate negative behavior forever. The second reason why discipline can be a source of frustration is because of the fact that, when children misbehave, it usually triggers a whole load of negative emotions in the parent, right? You start doubting your skills as a parent, you start doubting whether you're a good parent or not. You start feeling guilt, you start feeling exhausted because you've been dealing with the same thing over and again. And usually that kind of, feeling, when you start feeling guilty or start feeling as though you're a bad parent, it's not a good place to be. Okay, that's why it can actually make you to be desperate to just try anything that there is out there just to ensure that you don't go back to that same place where you feel like you're a parent who is failing. The third reason why parents are frustrated is because they are comparing with other parents. They are comparing their kids with other kids. I think I've shared the story of a parent who, before she took my course, she used to go to a neighbor's home, I think a friend's home, and she used to praise that friend's child. Oh, your child is just two, and they can sit down for 3-4 hours straight while and give it some peace while they just watch TV quietly. And she kept on saying her own child could not do that. She kept on saying her friend is so blessed. How did she get her child to be able to sit still? So she kept on comparing her child to the other child, not realizing that what she spent her time admiring was instead unhealthy, was instead inappropriate. So many times, because we spend our time comparing, look at you, you're 12 years old, your mates are here, they're able to do this and that. Look at maybe the neighbor's child. The neighbor's child is also 12 and can do this, but you're here still not able to do this. So when you compare that way, you would always feel like what you're doing is inadequate, and you would always miss out on the effort your child is making, which can actually set you back. It's going to bring you to the point where you feel like what you're doing is not even working at all. All right. So you defeat yourself just by comparing. So comparison will defeat you. If you compare your child, even with their siblings, it already sets you up for defeat. So don't do that. Don't compare your kids. Don't compare even the behavior of your children with the behavior of other kids. Yes, there are certain measures, there are certain things that should give us an idea of what could be expected. But then to want your child to be like another child, to be like some other child, even if they're of the same age, will cause you to be frustrated with your discipline measure. All right. So I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever doubted your approach to discipline? This is a rhetorical question because, of course, if you're a parent, certainly you must have had to face certain scenarios with your child where you began to question whether you even know what you're doing. All right. Where you began to second guess, you began to doubt the things that you're doing to help your child be able to learn the right behavior. So why does it seem like discipline is not working? If you read my write-up, the write-up I put up on different platforms, one of the things I said is that appropriate discipline does not truly fail. And that's true. Because when discipline is appropriate, there are certain things that are in place. Okay. Before you can say your discipline is appropriate, if it's appropriate for the child that you're trying to address, it can hardly fail. The question now is, are you applying discipline or are you applying punishment? Because what hardly fails is discipline, not punishment. Punishment usually will lead you to the wrong place. But discipline is not the same as punishment. They're not the same thing. All right? They are different. And true discipline, when your discipline is appropriate, it can hardly fail for several reasons, which you're going to see ahead. It can hardly fail. So the question now should be, am I applying discipline or am I applying punishment? And if you are applying discipline, the next question will be, is it appropriate? Am I doing it the right way? Am I doing it, approaching this child, bearing their age and their stage of development in mind? Or am I just doing what I can with the knowledge I have? So it's one thing to have knowledge, and it's another thing to know how and when to apply the knowledge that you've gotten. So remember that discipline is a long-term investment. That's why it's not the same as punishment. Because punishment has as goal immediate change, immediate results. But true discipline has as goal progressive change. So it has to do with a process. So true discipline is ready to endure a process. Whenever you find yourself expecting the child never to do it again, you're already defeated, because not only are you not going to be unprepared when the child eventually does it again, but then you're going to be frustrated because you think that the child is doing this thing just to frustrate you. You've forgotten that no skill is learned overnight. Lasting change never comes overnight. It comes, through a process. That means that you need patience. So without you being willing to be patient, all right. And the second point, be consistent in applying the same measure. So the reason why a discipline might not work is because we are trying to do everything. Parents often say, I've done everything I know, and yet the behavior won't go away. It won't change. So the problem with that particular situation is the fact that you're doing everything and not being consistent with something. You're doing everything instead of being consistent with something. So you're going to hardly be able to get results. So yesterday I used the scenario of, imagine you're trying to cut down a tree, and every single day you come to that tree and you cut here, the next day you cut somewhere else. So you're cutting the tree every day, but you're cutting it at different points instead of cutting it on the same spot, so that builds up to eventually cause the tree to fall. It's the same thing with behavior. I want you to think about appropriate behavior or effective discipline as a person trying to cut down a tree. They are going to keep applying the same effort on the same spot before they can get the kind of cumulative, result that, would be what they have been trying to achieve. So it's usually because we are trying to do everything. I've done everything. I've shouted. I've beaten the child. I have taken away this. I have done this. So you hear parents saying they have done everything, and that's the problem. One of the first things you must verify when you're struggling with behavior is whether or not you are consistent. Do I have a plan on how to respond for this behavior? Am I responding in the same way each and every time? Because it is that repetition that ends up communicating your message. Because if some days your child does what you don't want them to do, misbehaves, and today you do one thing, the next day you do another thing, what that tells the child is that, well, I can get away with this thing. It just depends on how my parent is feeling. So discipline should never be dependent on your feelings, on your moods. Okay? It should not depend on those aspects of you. Because if it does, then it's going to be very, very led by your convenience. The day you feel like shouting, you shout. The day you don't feel like shouting, you beat. The day you feel like, advising, you advise. So you're just always doing so many things instead of doing one thing consistently. You can never be able to tell whether your discipline is working or not if you are constantly changing your approach. You're getting more and more desperate. And the reason why you will find parents being very frustrated and trying to change approach too quickly is because they are expecting immediate results. So you see how your wrong expectations from the very beginning will defeat your approach. So let's say a child has told a lie today, and a parent wants to let the child know that this behavior is completely unaccepted. All right. So what does this parent do? The first day the child lies, the parent will yell at the child. The second day, the parent is shocked because this child comes and tells another lie again. So the parent does things that, for me to never see this lie telling again, I think I need to beat this child very well. So that's because the driving force behind the parent's approach is immediate results. So you see how, if that is your goal, that's what you have in your mind about approaching any behavior when it comes to your child, your discipline will often not work. Because that expectation of, I want it to change today, I want it to never come back, will cause you to keep doing different things. You keep adding the pressure. So today you yelled, tomorrow you beat the child, you gave 10 strokes. The next day you said, okay, now I'm going to give 20 strokes. The next day you go back to something else. You're just mixing and matching everything. That's why you struggle with your discipline. That's a core reason right there. First, the wrong perspective, the wrong goal for correcting, which is thinking that correcting today will give you forever change. Such that when you see the behavior again, you become desperate, or you start thinking that what you did the previous day was weak. So let's add it. Let's add the tempo. Let's add the volume. Let's beat harder. No, that's why you struggle. Because your message is a mixed signal. Your child finally is like, okay, so finally, what is it? Today I told a lie. My mother came back from the market. She was so angry. She didn't even talk to me. And then eventually you just forgot about it. So the child gets confused. So there are times when I lie and my parents would get upset, would beat me. There are times when I lie, the parent would get upset and just yell at me. And there are times when I would tell a lie and my parents would just be so upset that they will not even talk to you, they just go away, and eventually it blows over. Let me tell you what the child learns from this approach. The child will learn that that behavior is not that bad. It just depends on who they do it around and how that person they are doing it to feels at the moment. Is that what you want your child learning? That's why we have so many adults today who lack an understanding of what integrity is, because you lived your life constantly trying to please your parents. You live your life constantly trying to stay out of trouble. So it doesn't help. So why it might seem as though discipline is not working could be because of how the child is receiving your instructions or your correction. And this varies based on the age. Now, you must accept that every child is unique. Every child is unique, right? Are we in agreement? Every child is unique. So if every child is unique, it means that what works for A will not necessarily work for B. The fact that you just gave conscious talk to A and A adjusted doesn't mean that if you come and do the same to B, B will adjust. I think these are rude awakenings that parents usually have once they just become parents. You realize that, hey, so these kids are two different human beings. You find yourself constantly, comparing. So you must realize that children process discipline in different ways. This depends on their age, it depends on their stage of development, it also depends on the child's temperament. So yes, you might believe that your child just wanted to, disobey or just wants to keep rebelling. But you're going to be shocked sometimes to find out that it is just because of how the child is interpreting your discipline. What lesson is the child getting from what I'm trying to do? Is the lesson that the child should fear me, or is the lesson that the child should give up this behavior? Which one is it? Because you cannot really have both. Okay? You can't really have both. So remember that you need to be patient. When you think that this thing is not working, then you need to check your level of patience. Am I patient? When did I first see this behavior? And what have I been doing consistently to try to change it? So, have I been patient? Am I expecting too much too soon? Look at what helps children to have good behavior is skills. And there is no way you can beat skills into a child. You cannot beat skills. If they could beat skills into people, then I'm sure there are people who prefer to go and be beaten so they can become pilots. Right? You would think that, okay, so there's no need going to school because I can be beaten and I'm going to develop the skills I need. So there's no amount of beating or yelling that can substitute the training that helps your child develop the skills that will help them behave better. Take, for example, a child who has tantrums at age 2. What they need at that level is for you to nurture their emotional intelligence and be able to coach and guide them when they have crisis. That's a job. I wish I could tell you it takes 1 year to do that. But it goes on for as long as the child is a child. So remember that children will require that you be patient with them. Be patient with your children. You have to be patient with your children. So patience is crucial. Okay? Because behavior change occurs in stages. I wish it could just be a one-time, one-day thing. No. Most of the toughest behaviors will change over time. So your child needs you to be consistent with your message. And finally, you need to reinforce the idea that discipline is not control. It's not control. When you keep seeing yourself as the controller, as the one that should be obeyed at all times, you're always right, you're going to raise people who struggle to lead themselves. You're going to raise people who might even struggle to like themselves, because in most cases, some of these things come with some levels of emotional abuse as well. So remember that discipline is not about control, but it's about teaching your child skills. So whenever you encounter a difficult behavior, the next question should be, what skill does my child need to be able to navigate this challenging stage? What skill? If your child is constantly hurting their siblings, then your child might have issues with their emotions, managing their emotions. So you need to be able to teach the child about how to manage their emotions. When you have a child who struggles with lies telling, honesty is a skill. As well, we don't realize that honesty is a skill, but it is a skill. Because there are times when honesty is very hard, even for adults, because there's a lot at stake. So honesty is a skill. Those are just examples of skills that you need to teach children. It helps them a lot. So remember, let's talk. Let me just jog your memory a little bit about what you must remember about discipline. The first thing, of course, is the fact that discipline needs patience and process. All right, there is no change that will not require time. And remember that short-term defiance or your child disobeying you, does not mean failure. Just because the behavior repeats itself does not mean that the strategy you're using has failed. No. Remember, no skill is learned overnight. No behavior changes that last for a long time will change overnight. All right? So you're going to need lots of learning while you're going through the process with your child. So another thing you must remember about discipline is the fact that discipline needs consistency. I think this is the reason why it's so frustrating for parents, because it needs you to respond the same way. But I promise you, if you can build structure to the point where it helps you be able to, round up what you're doing, then you're going to see that it's easier for you to be consistent. All right? When children know what to expect, it helps them to behave better. But not just that. When you've clearly stated what will happen when certain things happen, it helps you to be consistent. Most parents change too frequently their approach because number one, they expect immediate results. Number two, they lack a system that can help them repeat the same thing over and again. This is the reason why taking courses is so important. If you just learn how to set up structure, you're going to be able to address even those old age habits that have been difficult to deal with. Because now there is a framework for your consistency. There's a framework for your consistency. So skill building must come over punishment. Look, when we punish children, when you discipline children that do not have the skill set required for what you expect, you're just punishing them. It's just like asking a 2-year-old to sit still. That's what we do often, right? And then the child suddenly, after a while, gets up, starts running around. You hit the child. You hit the child. You hit the child because of your ignorance, because you fail to realize that expectation is not appropriate for that age. So you spend your time expecting your 2-year-old to behave themselves like a 9-year-old. It's not going to happen. So skill building over punishment. What skills can I help? What skills will help my child deliver the behavior that I need to see from them? So it's not about controlling behavior. It's first about teaching. Discipline is teaching. And one of the things you have to teach your child is skills, emotion regulation skills, conflict resolution skills, honesty skills. There are different kinds of skills, okay, that will help your child thrive. For those of you who are coming onto the holiday program, this is one of the things that we're going to emphasize. This is the only course over the span of an entire year where we talk and teach about different skills. During the course of the year, the curriculum for the BSBC course does not permit that particular aspect because it's already too bulky. So we're going to learn about how to delay, how to teach those skills that helps your child be able to delay gratification. That's what I was going to say. All right. So it's not about controlling. Every correction that you give to your child must include guidance on how to make better choices. Any discipline that doesn't bring the child to the point where they are equipped and empowered to be able to make decisions, that line up with your values, then you are just beating around the bush. You're beating around the bush. So age-appropriate expectations are also very key. All right? These are key principles of purposeful parenting for effective discipline. Age-appropriate expectations are very, very important because a child's behavior, according to their stage and age of development, is a reflection of where their brain is when it comes to development. Toddlers are very irrational people, right? They're very irrational people, and that's understandable. They have very young and immature brains, even though they are trying to learn how to talk, to walk, and to meet with other people. But they are just irrational beings. Why? Because their brain is not yet capable of that level of function. But as they grow, this changes. So one of the things you must consider when you are trying to create your discipline is asking yourself whether what I'm expecting from this child, is it okay? Can they be able to give that to me at this age? That's a key question, because if not, you're going to be frustrated over and again, and you're going to frustrate your child. So you can't get results that way. You can't get results that way. No way. So let's look at common reasons why, common things that will defeat your discipline. What are some of those things that, if you have them or you're doing them, will end up defeating your strategy? Now, the very first place we're going to start from is the fact that punishment will lead to resentment. When you punish children instead of when you punish children instead of teaching them what they need to be able to do better, you are just turning around in circles. You're turning around in circles. So discipline, there are certain things that you might find yourself doing at some point that will defeat your approach, that will make it ineffective. One of the things that makes it ineffective is if you are applying punishment instead of applying discipline. Punishment has been proven to actually, create a gap between parents and their children. It creates resentment, it creates bitterness, and these are things that you want your child, to be able to navigate. So punishment is what parents do when they are in an emotional state. Usually when you're very angry, when you're very irritated or frustrated, what tends to come out in that moment is punishment, not discipline. It's punishment and not discipline. So why punishment often leads to resentment instead of behavioral change is because of the fact that it does not focus on equipping the child, it focuses on gaining control. The focus of punishment is control, while the focus of discipline is to equip and to empower the child. So you see how both approaches are going to get very different results. So the parent who is more focused on equipping the child, empowering the child to be able to lead themselves, which is what discipline actually is. Another parent is just waiting for the child to fail so that he can punish the child for not being able to give them what they need, what they want from the child. That's a crucial point. Please help me put that in the comments. One of the reasons why discipline might fail or corrective measures might fail is because if you find yourself in the punishment zone, what you're doing is that you are emphasizing control, but not teaching the child, not empowering the child to be able to do better the next time. While the other person who is applying discipline appropriately, what that person is doing is equipping and empowering the child to be able to lead themselves. So one will lead you to keep going run around in circles, which is punishment. The second reason that would defeat your discipline, second thing that would defeat your discipline is inconsistency. I think this is one of the most common after the first one. Many parents find themselves in the punishment zone instead of discipline zone. Secondly, many parents are inconsistent. Remember I said earlier that whenever you have a behavior that you find yourself saying, I have done everything I know how to do, that is your problem right there. The problem why you don't see results is because you're doing everything instead of being consistent with something. That's what gets results. Remember the tree. Cutting it everywhere will cause you to take 3 months to cut down a tree that could have been cut down in 1 day. Meanwhile, hitting it consistently on the same spot, hitting that tree with your machete continuously on the same spot is what will actually get that tree to fall down quicker. That's what consistency does. So what is your message? How do you want to respond to a particular behavior? You need to decide it in advance. You're going to fail if you think that you're just going to, do something the first time and then it just goes away. So, what is your plan? The reason why we struggle with consistency is because we don't have a plan. When something happens, we are not only are we in a rush to go and correct it, but then we don't sit down to reflect. That's why a purposeful parent is one that is able to pause every time their child misbehaves. Discipline should not be rushed. Discipline should not be rushed because in the rush of discipline, there are usually lots of casualties. It should not be rushed. There's a lot at stake for you to rush into something so important. Now, there's a debate that I often have with parents. I have them reaching out to me asking me, "Oh, my child, has been misbehaving, so I decided to send him to boarding school to straighten him a little bit." There is so much behind this particular approach that I am not sure to still be on course if I should open up the can of worms. Okay, if I should open up those kind of worms, I'm not sure that I'll be able to live as I plan to do. So once you find yourself, sorry, okay, so mixed signals will keep on passing to your child different messages about their behavior. Today is okay, tomorrow is not. So every single day, you're doing something different. Sometimes you allow it to go free, sometimes you respond. Sometimes you allow someone else to take care of it. Sometimes you just call the child and just say something to the child. That passes a lot of messages to your child. The next reason why you might often defeat yourself when it comes to discipline is because you are having inappropriate expectations. It's not appropriate. You're approaching a 2-year-old as though they are 14, and you're approaching a 14-year-old as though they are 2. Oh, yes, it goes both ways. All right, it goes both ways. Many times you have parents, trying to discipline a 14-year-old as though they were doing it to a 2-year-old. You stand there and you're publicly shaming the child. You cannot be discreet in your approach. The child has no say. The child cannot explain themselves. There is nothing. You're just going on and on and on and on as though they were 2 years old. A 14-year-old is not a 2-year-old. And then you go to the 2-year-old and then you start approaching them as though they were 14, expecting adult behavior from your child just because they can walk by themselves and they are learning to talk. We often forget that they are just 2 years old and they don't know their left from their right yet. So it's important that your expectations are appropriate, and this comes by you learning about child development. What should I expect for every stage of child development, but especially the stage at which my children are right now? It's important that you're able to, have an approach that respects or that pays attention to the age of the child, because age here has to do with a reflection of the state of maturity of the brain. The smaller the child, the more immature their brain is. And finally, you keep defeating yourself by applying fear-based parenting. The reason why fear-based correction measures will defeat you is because when you apply fear, not only does it not teach skills that will actually help the child do better, when you're very hard on the cane, when you yell all the time, what it does is that it tells your children that you cannot be trusted. It tells your kids, if I ever have a problem, I cannot come to this person because they have this equipment, to treat me this way and to do this and to do that. So we often pride ourselves in, oh, my children are so scared of me. That's not something to boast about. You can't gloat about that because it, by default, defeats your role as a parent. What's your role as a parent? To teach and to guide, right? So how can you guide someone that you cannot even see? Many parents have a version of their child that is very different from who the child actually is. Sometimes because we tell ourselves things that don't exist. You've never taught, and yet you expect your child to just know that this thing is wrong. I remember the time I posted about how I started teaching my kids intentionally about cheating in exams and why it's not okay. And mind you, cheating here is not just about my child trying to copy answers from another person or bringing what they call cartouche into the hall, but cheating is also about your child thinking that helping their friend who doesn't know the answer is correct. We don't realize that kids need to be taught these things. There are children who have lost, had sanctions at major exams because they thought they were helping a friend. Because their teacher, we've heard stories of how teachers during major exams tell students, be kind, help your friend. That's not okay. Let white be white and black be black. In our setting, we often create gray areas. We call them white lies, we call them helping people, but then it's going against a child's belief system or the values you taught the child. I taught my kids intentionally about cheating during exams, what it looks like and what it means and why it's not okay. And guess what? My child actually had an experience where they were sitting with someone who spent time peeping into their paper. And the teacher had to intercept when he was trying to tell the boy, no, please stop. You're not supposed to look into my paper. Please stop that. You're going to get me into trouble. The teacher caught the movement and came to their desk. So imagine if he had been cooperative. We always say cooperate now. So the child is trying to cooperate, and then the child, because when they catch people, that happening, it's not just the person copying that is sanctioned. Both of you are sanctioned because that's cheating. All right, you helping your friend is cheating. That's your cheating. It's not correct. Ethically, morally, it's not right. So I had to teach them that yes, you might know the part where you shouldn't be copying answers from someone else, but do you know that if your friend in the exam hall is begging you for an answer, helping them will get you, because that's breaking the rules. It can get you into trouble. So it's not okay. So some kids will get into trouble because they thought that they were just trying to be kind. I'm just trying to be kind. He begged me, so I just allowed it. And then you end up, having to have a zero on that exam because you were caught cheating. And then the child goes and start crying. Oh, I never knew. I was trying to help. So sometimes we think that kids should just know these things. We don't think to teach. Even if you think your child should already know or should just know or should have been taught, you're the parent. You're the first and most important teacher. So teach. Teach your child. Don't assume knowledge. Assumption is a faulty foundation, for building anything that will last long. So remember that the fear-based parenting, if you're gloating, thinking that, your child fearing you is an achievement, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Your child fearing is not an achievement. On the contrary, it defeats your purpose as a parent because you cannot guide someone that you're not seeing. So the emphasis on fear, punishing kids without taking time to actually sit down and teach them defeats your discipline approach. It will defeat you because your child is too afraid of you to tell you that they need help. They are too afraid of you to actually come to you when they are struggling. And once that can't happen, you will hardly be able to help your children develop the skills that they need to really thrive. The parent-child relationship needs trust. The more trust you have with your child, the more they are willing to cooperate with your leadership. I go deep down into this particular concept in my book that has just, it's out for pre-order right now. To let parents understand, sometimes we don't get it. How can you tell me, how does trust help my child do what they're supposed to do? Trust me, it has a very big role because children are not robots. So cooperation, if you followed my sessions this month, you must have heard me say cooperation is a far superior goal than control, than absolute obedience. Because not only does absolute obedience raise children who are unable to lead themselves, who are vulnerable to peer pressure, but absolute obedience will help you raise a child that cannot think for themselves. Absolute obedience will cause your children to often be at opposition to your leadership because they don't have a say. Cooperation is a higher goal. It is. And that you begin to reap the fruits of cooperation when you spend your time building that trust, building that connection. So if your discipline is often emotional, it's often emotionally led, instead of you doing it from a place of calm and wisdom, you would often defeat yourself. That's why you might not be working because you're often carried away by your emotions. Your child does something and you can't control yourself. You find yourself, changing approach all the time because you're overly frustrated to be able to think. When a child misbehaves, especially when they do something over and over and over, what are you rushing for? It's not the first time you're meeting that thing. That's time for you to pause. We're going to look at questions that you should ask. All right. How to know whether what you have been doing is actually working. We're going to look at that in the next segment. That's not the time to rush in and, just start trying to get immediate results again. There's no rush there. The child has been doing this. Maybe they've been calling you from school to say, oh, your child, is bullying another child. The child has come home, you've tried to do everything to discipline, but they keep calling you, your child keeps bullying. They don't rush into the measures. When it keeps happening, when the report remains the same over and over and over and over, that's time for you to pause. There's no rush. Because all the rushing you've been doing in the past has still not gotten you to where you seem to be making progress. So there's no rush. You need to reflect. You need to ask yourself questions. All right? What am I doing? Is it working? Is this approach the right one to use? So which of these factors which I've shared here have actually influenced or often defeated you? Which one would you admit is the source of the defeat you encounter when it comes to dealing with behavior successfully? Is it inconsistency? Is it the fact that you're often punishing instead of disciplining your child? Is it because your expectations are often inappropriate? Are you fond of using fear-based methods, threatening, beating, hitting your kids, or are you a highly emotional parent who struggles to be able to be calm when their child misbehaves? Which one is it? Because every one of these things, if they are not approached correctly, will be the source of your defeat. So when it seems as though a child's behavior just keeps getting worse, the first thing to question is not the child, it is you. Because parenting is first about you, about what you know and what you're doing with it. So the question is, usually we are defeated as well because we keep focusing on the child. The child is not doing, the child is not doing, the child is not doing. But if you switch that approach and put your own self under assessment first, you would often be able to get to make progress. If you learn to ask question you, am I consistent? Am I teaching? Am I overreacting from my emotions? Am I using fear instead of building trust? Are my expectations right? Sometimes it just takes you to look at this thing I'm even expecting the child to do. Is it age appropriate? Each of us falls into this trap every now and then, especially because children would tend to grow faster than their parents can adapt. When your child steps into a new season of their growth and development, usually it takes time for you to acclimate. It happens even to me, where I forget that, oh, I should be expecting more or I should be expecting less because I've not noticed that the child has already, another birthday has passed, the child has gone further. I should now be able to do more or expect more, or I should be doing less of this instead of that. Take, for example, reminders. I talked about reminders. I said the younger a child, the more they need you to support them by reminding them about certain things every now and then. But then we forget a toddler might actually grow to age 5, and we are still approaching them as though they are toddlers. So I said that parents usually adapt later than the actual growth rate of a child. You still keep calling the child baby when he's already 5. Because in your mind, you're still seeing that baby you just carried, especially when it's your last. I noticed that I keep calling my last child baby, and he will correct, Mama, I'm no longer a baby. He will tell Mama, I'm no longer a baby. Because in my head, when I look at him, I still see a baby, even though he is almost 5. I still see a baby. So that just tells you about how it is very easy to fall into the trap of inappropriate expectations. Expecting more than a child can give per time. Expecting more than a child can give, or expecting more than you have first given the child, because discipline should start from you teaching the child. Okay, so how to know when discipline is actually working? Now, let's say you have a behavior that just seems to not be going anywhere. The child is still stealing, the child is still lying, the child is still fighting a lot, the child is still, there's some of these behaviors that can really be a source of frustration for parents. These are the topics that I often get parents coming to me for private sessions. Right? My child is a picky eater. My child is, there's this behavior, rebellion, or whatever that I've encountered. No matter what I've done, it keeps just getting worse. So how can you know when you just need to be patient and keep doing what you're doing? I think that's the question here, right? Because you need to be able to distinguish between when you need to switch your strategy and do something different, and when you need to persist with what you're doing, with your response. Those who've taken the courses understand what I'm saying, because discipline needs strategy. It needs a strategy. So you need to be able to figure out, when do I need to change gear? When do I need to switch to another approach? When do I need to change the consequence? All right. When do I need to adjust my approach? And how can I know if no matter the fact that I can't see results yet, what I am doing is working. Because sometimes it might just be a glimmer of hope. That's all you get. And that could be enough to tell you what I'm doing is working, even though the child is not yet at a place where the behavior doesn't show up again. Okay, so the first thing that you can help you know whether your approach is working is when you see small behavior shifts. I often share with parents. I think that for if you were at the toddler session yesterday, I said that when I was working with my toddler to get him to stop hitting, right? One of the things I did was that I was very keen to notice even a small win, a small step in the right direction. I will rush in there and just praise the child. So the child knows that I am looking out for what I've been teaching you about this behavior. The child knows that it matters. So there's you might see a small glimmer of hope, a small ray of hope. That already tells you you're in the right direction. So improvement does not always have to be drastic to mean that what you're doing is working. All right. Improvement doesn't mean the behavior will disappear automatically forever for you to know that what you did worked. Remember, expect your child to do it again and again and again and again for a while before your lesson goes through. Because a big part of you teaching that lesson is you expecting that your child will repeat the behavior so that you can repeat the lesson. That's it, because it's about emphasis. Right? Discipline is teaching. It's about emphasis. If this behavior is unacceptable, let it remain unacceptable. Let it not change tomorrow and you look at it and you ignore. That would be a mixed signal. So small behavior shifts, small steps in the right direction. The reason why we often miss the small progress our kids are making is because we are so focused on immediate results that we are so frustrated that we cannot even see the small effort the child is making. If there is one thing you can achieve from this particular session, is for you to leave here reminding yourself that immediate results are not the goal of effective discipline. They are not the goal. It needs process and it needs patience. You need those things. Without those two things, you would often keep running around like a headless chicken, reading every blog. There's some parents that are on 50 different groups for parenting. You're confusing yourself. All right. I often tell parents, look, if you're on my forum and it's not serving you what you need, leave and go to the other one that is serving you. But most importantly, you need to be able to put roots somewhere so you can grow. All this jumping up and down ends up overwhelming you with different emotions, with different knowledge. And then you're confused at which one should I apply. All right. So some people subscribe for several courses. You're here, you're there, you're doing everything. You're attending you're following so many different teachers. It ends up confusing you. So improvement does not always mean need drastic change for you to know that what you're doing is working. It might just be a small shift in the right direction, a small one. But are you keen enough to notice? You're usually blinded by the fact that you want it to be gone forever. You don't want to ever see it again. Immediate results. The second way you can know that your discipline is working is when you have a strategy that focuses on building connection in spite of the behavior. Many times, parents will often, prioritize good behavior over their relationship with their child. They prioritize good behavior. They just want the child to be good. They don't spend time validating the child even outside of their behavior. It's very important that your children hear you say, I'm proud of you, you're doing great, you're a wonderful person outside of their doings. Children need to know that they are not good or loved just because of their doings. All right? So your discipline approach must be able to separate your child from the behavior. Okay, because if the message your child gets is constantly only centered around their behavior, you end up letting the child know that, so long whenever they do something wrong, they're not acceptable to you and you can't love them when they're that way. So your child needs to get a balanced message from you that in spite of their behavior, your relationship matters most to you. You must put connection above control. Discipline works best when it is applied in a setting where there is mutual respect and there is connection. Try it. This is what a whole course I built, the Building a Strong Bond with Your Child course. That's what it's all about. It's all about teaching parents how to build that connection so that it facilitates their role as parents. Because that's what it does. You're sweating because you lack connection. The connection that gives you cooperation, you lack it. So you're constantly needing to apply force. You're constantly needing to work too much for things that you could have just said a word and your kids are willing to cooperate. Now, this is not always going to be perfect, but connection-based parenting actually helps you stress far less. Parents, I've heard this testimonial over and over and over again. All right, that it's much more easier now. My kids are much more willing to cooperate. Why? Because now they feel seen, heard, and valued outside of their behavior. The next way you can know your discipline is working is when your child is now able to understand the consequence for their choices. All right, when the child is able to understand the consequence of their choices, then it means that you have now begun to get to the point where those that setup helps the child make better decisions because they are aware of the consequence of choice A and the consequence of choice B. If I choose not to do my chores, then it means I've also chosen not to go and play outside. That's a simple example, very basic. So if your child doesn't understand that actions have consequences, you're going to keep struggling. That's why it's important that your response is, uniform as much as possible. Because if you keep changing the approach, your child is going to keep getting different messages about their behavior. But when a child understands, in my home, there are certain things that are set, almost in stone, meaning that the children they are aware of the consequence to the point where whenever they want, there are times they choose to go the opposite way. So like I said, just like you, an adult, there are times when you choose to go against the rules, even though you know what will happen when you go against them. It's the same thing for kids. As they grow, part of healthy development is for a child to test boundaries. Sometimes it's not really just about your discipline measure, it's about the child's growth and development. It's not that what you're doing is not working, but your child is at a stage where they are wired to test boundaries like the teenagers. They will test it. It doesn't mean they are not learning or that the discipline is not working. So you must learn to pick the right message, from your circumstance. When you start experiencing less resistance in that area over time, maybe you've been dealing with a child who doesn't want to do chores. And before you get the child to do chores at first, you would talk and preach and do this and do that. It was always an uphill task. And then you get to a point where out of 7 days a week, your child is able to lead themselves to do that chore without anybody nagging them at least 2 or 3 times. You're making progress. You must learn to see the glass as half full instead of always half empty. All right? So these are some questions that you could ask when you're trying to troubleshoot your discipline. Firstly, is my child beginning to recognize right from wrong, even if they don't fully follow the instruction? Are they able to truly understand why telling lies is wrong and why honesty is the way to go? This helps you identify gaps in your teaching, all right, and help you find different ways to emphasize what you're teaching as well. The second question you might ask is my discipline helping my child build skills? Because it is ultimately, they are the skills a person has that helps them sustain acceptable behavior. If a child is always fighting, always bullying, always aggressive towards others, it's an emotional control problem. It's not a my child is stubborn problem. The child lacks the skill that helps them to be able to control their emotions when they are triggered. So it's not about you here. It's not about the fact that you're yelling at them. I shared with the class this morning, for those who are on the programs that are currently going on, the story that is currently rocking Douala right now of a teenager that killed another teenager in a state of rage. He was angry at something that happened in class. And as soon as they were out on break, he just launched at the other one with I think it was some kind of building material that was lying in the yard. And he actually fractured the other one's skull at the back. It got fractured. All right. So in that moment, that boy was at the mercy of his rage. It's not an excuse, but that was the driving factor. Because if he were able to control his anger, he's 18. If he had been taught how to navigate, how to manage his emotions, I promise you the story will be different. For the rest of that boy's life, he will always have that stigma of having taken the life of his own mate. Can you imagine how small things we neglect can end up becoming very big things that put us in a position where we are in regret? I wish I knew this. That's why I tell you, parenting can and should be learned. Many parents don't teach their kids what to do with anger because they themselves don't even know what to do with it. The parents who are rounding up from the Parenting with Emotional Intelligence course will testify about how much of a difference that knowledge makes. Just knowing how to coach your child through an episode of emotional overwhelm, how to help them know what to do, is a game changer. Imagine this boy going to jail just because he never got the guidance that he needed. It's heartbreaking. Because most people look at it as they just blame the child. But the question is, the one who was supposed to equip this child, did that person play their part to the full? There are questions we are going to answer tomorrow. And these questions will be, you are called to be the first teacher to this child, to be the trainer, to be the guide, to lead this child. Did you play your part? Can you really say that my work is done? I have given this child what they need to thrive. I've done my part. Because when the scripture says, train up a child in the way that he should go, that places a responsibility on parents to train. So, what are you training your child in? Your child should learn how to manage emotions. And that cannot happen if you don't learn how to manage yours. So, does my child understand the consequences of their action? One of the things, I have a child of mine, I think my first, his temperament is the one which is, predisposed to emotional extremes. So we often have conversations that help him see, because that's the thing. Parents think that children understand. A child of age 9 cannot understand the implications of of consistently not brushing his teeth, for example, of consistently skipping oral hygiene. He doesn't realize that if he continues on that path, his teeth will be damaged and he's going to have funny looking teeth, stained teeth, and all of that. So he's completely lost in the moment. He cannot look beyond. That's why children need parents. You've had all the experience that can help your child see that this path you are on, this is where it ends. Storytelling can help you do that. All right. Sharing your own experience can help you do that. So this thing is not just one doing the same thing, shouting, shouting, shouting. No, there are other things that you can do. Storytelling is a tool for helping children understand what's expected of them. All right. So is our relationship remaining respectful and supportive despite the child's misbehavior? Am I still communicating to this child that they are lovable and accepted, even though they are putting up this misbehavior? Because a child that feels unaccepted, that feels like they don't matter, has more motivation to misbehave than the one that feels secure. This is truth. When a child feels loved, secure in your relationship, they have greater motivation to try to do better than a child who has given up because they know that no matter what I do, I'm still going to be punished. I'm still going to be looked at down, perceived like this. When a child has given up trying, you're going to see a lot more misbehavior because they've lost their motivation to try. They've lost their motivation to want to please you. That's why cooperation is a higher goal. Because at the bottom of cooperation is a child that is willing, is eager to do stuff because of the connection they have with their parents. The child wants to do the things you want them to do. It's different from a child who is just doing it because you're forcing them. So cooperation is a higher goal. So when you need to switch strategy, we're running up. When you need to switch your strategy, how should you go about it? So yes, of course, you may ask these questions and actually see that you have the right things in place, but then it's still not working. So yes, that could call for a switch in your strategy. If you're not seeing any changes, if the behavior keeps getting worse, you've been doing it for a while and it keeps getting worse instead of better. You're not seeing any sign of any improvement. After being consistent with the same approach over and over and over, it's time to change. And hey, guess what? The beating and the yelling, it applies to those things too. That's why I appeal to parents, learn how to discipline effectively. Because you've been beating and yelling at this child for 10 years and you're still seeing the same behaviors and you still continue with the same approach. You're doing the same thing and expecting the same results. and expecting different results. Sorry. You've been yelling and beating for lying for 10 years, and you don't realize that your child is only perfecting it. They're perfecting it. That's why I said many parents don't know their kids because they don't even see them. They don't see them because the kids are hiding. They lack the skills to deliver what you want them to deliver. So they know that if they don't hide, if they don't survive, you're going to keep punishing them. So the child is going to find a way to cope because they still don't have the skills that can help them deliver the behavior you expect. Skill building must be at the foundation of effective discipline because that is what actually equips the child to be able to do better. Right? That's what equips the child. So, no improvement despite consistent effort. All right? Increase of the negative behavior instead of the child seeming to make some improvement. When the child starts emotionally distancing themselves, because discipline should teach, not push your child away. True discipline does not push children away, it brings them closer. And that's a fact. I've had my kids tell me often, Mama, thank you for correcting me. Thank you for teaching me. My kids often appreciate how we correct them. We're not lenient parents. Trust me. Effective discipline is not as easy as you think. It's not soft at all because there are some measures in there that are tougher than just beating your child is a slap on the wrist. When you actually let children experience the consequence of their decisions, especially the natural ones, trust me, it can be tough. It takes you, the parent, to also brace yourself to be able to give those consequences. So, when your child is going through new developmental stages, it might be time to change your strategy. Right? What was working for a toddler will definitely not work when your child gets to the preschool age and to the middle school age. So, as your child grows, your strategy should evolve because there are certain things, for example, life telling, something that's you're gonna see at different points of your journey. All right. So as your child grows, your strategy should evolve. Don't keep doing the same thing without realizing your child has crossed from one stage to another. All right. So have you ever felt like you needed to change your discipline approach? And what made you feel that way? You can ask, you put it up in the comments, and I'm going to be able to get back to you. If you need some help, you can ask questions if you're still here, and I'll be able to answer. All right. What point did you get to on your journey? What behavior did you encounter that made you feel like you need to change your strategy? You need to change your approach. Let me hear from you in the comments. All right, we've come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for listening patiently. For those who are here, I didn't see anyone in the comments. The comment section is pretty quiet. I hope that it means that you are just digesting what is coming at you. But sometimes to help me know where you are and to help me be able to, help you as well, it's important to, let me know what's happening in the comment section. All right. So remember, discipline is a journey. It's not a quick fix. Quick fixes don't work. They only give rise to temporary change or to hypocrisy, where your child is pretending. Your child has learned to be a different person with you and a different person when they're out there. Trust me, you don't want that because you're going around in circles. That's why many parents will allow the habit to grow. Why? Because the child was hiding with it. So they were not aware it was even still there until it gets to the point where it's so difficult, to break because it has become a habit. So be flexible, be able to adapt as your child's needs changes as they grow. All right. So remember, please share your experience in the comments and feel free to share this session with anyone within your circle that might benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for your support. I haven't had a question, so I'm going to shut down. And to see you again next Thursday, same time. Bye.